Hello and welcome to the new podcast, Perspective 577. And in this first episode of what will hopefully be a number of episodes, we are going to talk about two things. One section of this video will be mostly taken up by the Black Panther movie that is soon to be released this year. Specifically, the political comments that have recently arisen regarding the movie itself and telling certain races what to do in that context. And we shall briefly comment on the Han Solo trailer, and I'll briefly give my thoughts on whether or not the film may turn out okay. Let us dive into Black Panther first. This year is the 10th anniversary of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which started back with Iron Man in May 4th, 2008. So first and foremost, a congrats to Kevin Feige and the staff at Marvel for keeping this franchise going as long as they have. It really is amazing how they've managed to keep this franchise going for 10 years. And when Black Panther comes out, we will have 18 films under Marvel's belt, which is quite an impressive feat to say the least, especially considering how financially successful the films are, how mostly well received they have been as well. Now, there are comments that have been made recently as we approach Black Panther's release date, which will be the 17th this month. It'll be released a little earlier in my country, the UK, so hopefully at some point, Lord willing, I'll be able to go around and get to see Black Panther itself. But I just want to talk about the atmosphere that is surrounding this movie, which, to clarify, I don't think is Marvel's fault. This is quite different from the situation if we go back to 2016 with the Ghostbusters reboot, Ghostbusters Answer the Call, that came out. Sony, the cast, and Paul Feig were very vocal in the opposition regarding the film, but some of the things that have come up, Marvel, as far as I know, have not made a comment about these comments that have been arising. So I just want to briefly run down some things that have been said and of course read some of the comments that have been made surrounding this movie, which, to be perfectly honest, I think creates a very toxic atmosphere. One of the first things to mention, which is the most recent post on the subject of Black Panther, is this. A Christian group boycotting it, and it's a group called Christians Against Black Panther Movie Boycott Now. And this is what they said, and these quotations are courtesy of Midnight's Edge, specifically some of the members of the group. I won't name them, but props to the people who posted these screenshots and posted them. But anyway, the first thing the group says: "Welcome, my fellow followers of the Lord, our Saviour Jesus Christ. Thank you for joining our fight against the sinful movie that is Black Panther. As everyone knows by now, Marvel was acquired by liberal mega propaganda machine Disney. That's right, the same company that owns CNN, ABC, and our nation's biggest distraction, ESPN. They are always try to push their views on us as well as blatant racism. The racism is well documented going back to the 1930s. Just check out the videos on YouTube. This year they have gone too far. They are bringing out a movie glorifying the hate group, the Black Panthers. We will not stand for this. We will boycott and protest and spread the word of Jesus to these monsters at the Big Mouse Ear Corporation. They are evil. Thank you for joining our cause." And he ends with praising Christ and saying Amen, basically at the end. Now, I myself am a Christian. People know this. If anyone's looked at my previous videos, you'll know that I've commented on Judaism, Islam, and other topics, and occasionally I've made comments on movies. Now, putting aside the debate as to whether Christians can watch movies or not, because this is a peripheral issue in Christian circles. There are some Christians who argue for the movies being something for Christians to embrace, that they can embrace without being compromised in their religious convictions, and some maintain that they are things of the world to be given up. The same principle applies to video games. Some condemn them as childish, some play them with a clear conscience without any effect of their relationship with God. So these are peripheral issues that Christians can discuss among themselves. But I'm not going to address in this video whether or not Christians can look at movies or not. That is, I've spoken about this in an article that I have written, which I shall link in the description below. But to make comments on this, whatever you think of Disney, whether you like them, love them, hate them, I don't mind Disney myself. I've watched the Disney films, Aladdin, Hercules, some of the Renaissance films, basically. Well, most of the Renaissance films. Some of the older ones I haven't seen. I still haven't seen The Little Mermaid proper to this day. I will say, we should, biblically speaking, any film from Disney, and it's not just Disney that should be judged. Universal, Sony, Warner Brothers, Paramount, you name it. All the other companies in Hollywood should be judged. Any movie with a message should be judged by the scriptures, for that is the ultimate rule of faith for Christians. It's not the only faith for Christians, but it is the ultimate faith. All other authorities should be judged, whether it be action, doctrine. All those things are subject to the scriptures, and the messages in movies or the movies themselves are to be judged on those same terms, accurately as well in context. And Lord willing, in a future podcast, I may address some of the criticisms toward The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, both of which have had the accusations thrown at them of basically turning Rey into a Mary Sue and other objections as well. But that is a podcast for another time. But Disney has never tried to hide the fact that racism has occurred in the past. They have never tried to hide this. And it's not just Disney that are guilty of any blatant racism in the past. Warner Brothers have also had their fair share of racism. No company is immune to this. So you can't just hold, assuming this is what the group is doing, you can't just hold Disney to account and not hold other companies to account. You have to be consistent in that regard, even if it's a company you like. That is something to keep in mind. Really something to keep in mind. So we should move on to the next post, which says the following. And it's by a user on Twitter known as YPippo. The post itself says, quote, "White people, Black Panther rules. Do not see the movie in first week so that POC, people of colour, have a chance to see it first. If you've already bought tickets, give them to a person of colour. Post a positive review at Rotten Tomatoes. Do not wait to see the movie first. Sit in the back of the theatre." And the post ends there. And while good, you enjoyed the movie, first and foremost. Second, you have no reason to ban white people or any person from seeing Black Panther. The cinema is open to all. People are allowed to go to the cinema whenever they please. There is no law to say, nor should there be, to say that such and such an individual should be the first to see it. It doesn't matter about the melanin count in your skin. That is irrelevant. Why should that be a factor in who gets to see the movie first? Movies are for everyone and concepts are for everyone, as Confused Matthew once said. in his video review of TMNT, which sadly, thanks to Blip closing down, is no longer available for viewing, which... these things happen, but... No, don't just hand your tickets over to someone that you've paid good money for, unless they're a friend of yours and you want to treat them to something. Get a ticket for yourself and for them. Treat them to it. But don't forsake your ticket just to give them a chance to see it. You don't get special privileges because of your melanin count. No one does. No one should get special privileges because of their melanin counts. Whether you're white, black, Latino, whatever. It doesn't matter at all. The next part is also silly as well. Post a positive review at Rotten Tomatoes. Do not wait to see the movie first. Well, that'd be publicly lying to people because you have not seen the movie. If you haven't seen the movie, you are not entitled to comment on it on Rotten Tomatoes. And to post a positive review and not see the movie, again, is lying to people about seeing the movie. You should not be that dishonest. You really shouldn't do that. See the movie first, then you can post your review. This kind of thing would do damage to your credibility as an individual. Can you imagine the backlash that would have occurred if Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert would have done this? Can you imagine how much of a backlash they would have received if they gave a positive review for a film and did not see it? They would be an embarrassment. It would be news coverage. The Chicago Sun-Times and the Chicago Tribune, the respective newspapers they worked for, they'd be fired from them. Gene would be fired from the Tribune. The Sun-Times would fire Ebert. It would destroy their credibility. It would affect the critics as well. Maybe some critics would escape, but it would really damage the credibility of movie critics in the sight of many people. It really would. The general audience would not trust them. And also the statement, sit in the back of the theatre. Well, no, you can sit where you like, as long as you're not being bothersome, troublesome, or trying to hurt anyone or do anything criminal to them. You can sit any seat you like, as long as you're not causing trouble for everyone else. Why in the world should white people, or any person, be told to sit at the back of the theatre? This kind of attitude, we should get past that. Rosa Parks, for instance, sat in the back of the bus. A white person telling her to get up and saying she would not move. A brave woman she was. You would think, in this day and age, that we have gotten past this kind of racial division. And to go to the New Testament, with respect to salvation, in Galatians 3:28, it says, "There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free. There is no male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. And if you are Christ's, then you are Abraham's offspring, heirs according to promise." Which in that context would mean, and refers to the fact, that we are one in Christ as to salvation, referring to all who believe, of course, in that context. And the same thing would also apply to race. You are not excluded from something because of your race, whether it be salvation in Christ or something else. And in this case, the movie industry, the movie theatres, are no exception. There's absolutely no need for this kind of segregation, and to make the argument of institutionalized racism today as an excuse to be racist to white people is just flat out not only racist itself, but also absurd. Was there institutionalized racism in the past? Yes, but as Ben Shapiro has mentioned in the past, he's happy to fight institutionalized racism provided he's told who the perpetrators are. Using the phrase institutionalized racism is vague. It's too vague. There is no possible way you can fight something that is incredibly vague. Racism exists on its own. It can be tied to many things. It can be divorced from those things. Just because of institutionalized racism in the past, that doesn't mean that people should be carte blanched to do whatever they want in terms of being racist towards other people. The buzzwords of institutionalized racism is not an excuse for racism against white people. It is not an excuse for anyone to be racist. I don't care if your skin color is black or white. There is absolutely no reason for racism. And to go back to what I said, I don't see Marvel participating in this kind of thing. Marvel Studios, I don't think, is doing this. When I say Marvel, I'm referring to Marvel Studios, as there are many branches of Marvel, including the TV division as well as the comic book division, the latter of which has been suffering tremendously thanks to SJW identity politics, which is the subject of another video for another time, Lord willing. There's also a few more tweets which have been posted, and thanks to Midnight's Edge, they've been screenshotted, and we'll take a look at those again. Kay Lindo said the following, quote, "White people aren't allowed to see Black Panther until March 1st. Don't at me, those are the rules." Unquote. Again, this ties back into an earlier point that has been made by the fact that there are no restrictions on races visiting the cinema. You can be any colour race, that's not going to keep you out, and we shouldn't be dictated by someone of another race telling us not to go to the cinema, nor should we dictate to them. Next, we have a comment by It's Loud Inside My Head. Now, what has this man said? And I quote, "Dear white people, just a friendly reminder as the anticipation builds for Black Panther. This is for the culture. This doesn't concern you. Stay, TF, out of our way on February 16th. Keep all your opinions about the film to yourself unless you are asked, but don't worry, you won't be asked." What do you think would happen if you had a similar scenario? Let's say Captain America the First Avenger had this kind of politics surrounding it. Can you imagine the backlash that would have taken place at the time if you had a white person saying this about black people? All these rules, just simply replace the word white with black and replace Black Panther with Captain America the First Avenger. What do you think would happen to that person? They would be prosecuted. They would be slammed, mauled and savaged by the left constantly. They would be accused of being racist. Many terrible things would happen to them. Why hasn't this person on Twitter been prosecuted? Why haven't they been prosecuted for racism, or in the very least warned about racism? It's absolutely inconsistent, and it is abhorrent to overlook this kind of racial bias, or telling white people you have no business commenting on the film unless you're asked, but don't worry, you won't be asked. That is just bigoted. That is absolutely bigoted, and the left should be the first in condemning this kind of bigotry, since they pride themselves on condemning racism, and yet they use it as a justification to condemn white people, men especially. This final comment I'll be taking a look at with respect to the comments. It's quite possible that now, to be fair, this one was actually a trolling thread. It was meant as a joke, but can you imagine? Let's imagine for a moment this was a serious comment. The writing that's present above the picture of Stan Lee, and this was a comment posted by Chidden Nuddit, and again it is a joke post from what has been said about it. He said, quote, "This old man's purposeless role in Black Panther is another perfect example of white people putting their noses in places it doesn't belong. A thread." Now, apparently the joke was meant to be a Spider-Man joke, because the picture of Spider-Man is present in the profile icon, or something like that. But for the sake of this commentary, we'll treat it as serious. This is not an attack on Chidden, because this is a satirical comment. But if it were a real comment, I'd say this: that Stan Lee does have the right to be involved in the Black Panther movies. It has been a staple for Stan Lee since 1989 to be having a cameo in Marvel-related films and Marvel-related products. Even going back to the first X-Men film from the year 2000, you had Stan Lee cameo, whether it be a speaking role or just a nice, neat little Easter egg in the background. That's just a trademark of Marvel films, with one exception I can think of, which is Josh Trank's Fantastic Four, which is a video for another time, Lord willing, again. Though I would certainly recommend Midnight's Edge Trankgate, which is what got me looking at Midnight's Edge content in the first place. So I'd recommend checking out Trankgate. They've done a very good documentation on the happenings and corporate politics behind the scenes of Josh Trank's Fantastic Four. It's certainly a recommendation, and if you want to get into the content by Midnight's Edge, that is definitely a good place to start. Or even watching the Ghostbusters coverage, which is another set of videos to recommend to anyone who is interested. But bottom line, Stan Lee can cameo in any Marvel film he chooses. Kevin Feige has allowed this, the people at Fox and Sony have allowed this. Stan Lee, or any other writer who's been involved with the creation and inception of the Marvel Universe, should be allowed to make a cameo if they see fit. Now, finally, to give my thoughts on the trailer itself, the only trailer I've seen so far of Black Panther, it does look pretty promising. It does look pretty good. Chadwick Boseman so far, his performance is pretty stellar. And of course, Michael B. Jordan looks like he's going to be making a comeback in Marvel films. I think this may help Michael B. Jordan get back in the spotlight. Creed's already done that for him. Fantastic Four 2015 certainly didn't do Jordan any favours. So hopefully with Black Panther he should be able to make a comeback and probably win the Marvel fans over. Hopefully, we'll see. And of course, unlike Age of Ultron, hopefully Andy Serkis will actually be given a chance to shine as Ulysses Klaue. There's no question that the CGI, as per usual in a Marvel film, is usually pretty good, as well as the fact that the action set pieces look pretty promising as well. There's one particular shot where Black Panther actually... There's a pretty amazing shot where Klaue shoots the car, Black Panther runs on the side of a building, jumps onto the car and digs his claws right into the wheel. So all in all, the movie looks pretty promising. Now the only thing I'm going to say is, on the race issue here, it doesn't matter whether you're black or white or any skin colour. What really matters is how good the performance is. And from Civil War, which was the first appearance of Black Panther, we know that Chadwick Boseman did a pretty good job as Black Panther in that movie. So hopefully his first solo outing as Black Panther will be a good one. Again, it doesn't matter what race you are, as long as you deliver the goods in terms of the writing, the acting, the direction, the music, whatever the case may be, as long as you deliver on those points, people will praise the movie. For example, why is Matthew McConaughey hired for his work? Is it because he's a white guy? No, it's because he's talented. Why is Idris Elba hired for his work? Is it because he's black? No, it's because he's a talented man. That's why he's been thrust into so many projects. He's been in 2 Disney films from 2016, which were Zootopia, or Zootropolis as it's called in my country, and of course he was in Finding Dory. He was also in the Jungle Book remake as Shere Khan, a stellar performance in that, although I'm not sure what was wrong with the sound mixing. It just sounds a bit weird compared to the other characters in one scene, but other than that, Idris Elba's performance was good in that. The only thing I can say to suggest to anyone who wants to see Black Panther, see it the moment it comes out, see it for yourself, judge it for yourself, put the identity politics thing out of your head, just judge the film on its own terms. Whether it delivers the goods like Captain America the Winter Soldier, or whether it underperforms in your critical expectation, just judge the film for what it is and see how good it is for yourself. Now, we are moving on next to the Han Solo movie, which has been in development for some time. The news recently and Midnight Edge have reported on this, but I'll give a brief rundown here. The reports haven't been good in terms of the filmmaking process. Phil Lord and Chris Miller left the project or were fired due to creative differences with Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy. Reshoots have taken place under Ron Howard, as well as the fact that supposedly Alden Ehrenreich, who is playing Han Solo in this movie, needed a dialect coach on set, which does not sound very promising. But recently at the Super Bowl, the trailer was shown after many months, before the movie is set to be released on May 25th this year. The trailer itself has received a mixed reaction from the fans themselves. It's very divisive. What did I think of it? I thought it was pretty rad, actually. I'm probably one of the few out there that said it. I thought the trailer was pretty decent. It's too early to judge Alden Ehrenreich's performance in the film, but for the most part, I think he does a pretty decent job as Han Solo. It does look pretty rad. The special effects also look pretty good for the most part. Donald Glover does look very convincing as Lando Calrissian. Again, we need to see more of his performance before I can give a full judgment on it. The same also applies to Emilia Clarke, to this new character that she's playing. And I do not have too much to say on the trailer itself. It looks fine, but it does seem to take too many familiar cues from Rogue One. By that, an ensemble team being put together. It does feel like they're going down the Rogue One route again. That being said, I am being cautiously optimistic about the new Han Solo movie. I am cautiously optimistic about it. Despite the reshoots that have happened, despite Lord and Miller leaving the project and Howard being brought on board to reshoot the thing, Solo, a Star Wars story, is not the first Star Wars film to undergo reshoots. Rogue One had reshoots conducted on its production as well. And going back to the first Star Wars, A New Hope, that had production problems of its own. I'd recommend checking out the documentary Empire of Dreams, which can be found on the 2004 box set of the Star Wars original trilogy. It's a good documentary. It's about 2.5 hours long. It's very informative, and even George Lucas commented on some of the problems that the film had, as well as the narrator and some of the ILM staffers. And of course, had it not been for Alan Ladd Jr., Star Wars would have been shut down, and we would have never had the film franchise in the first place. So it's not the first time that Star Wars has undergone these kinds of issues. The best scenario for Han Solo, its reshoots will probably be akin to Star Trek Beyond, something that fixed many of the problems that were present in the original cut. The worst case scenario, it could be something similar to, let's say, Josh Trank's Fant Four Stick, as well as the Dark Tower film that came out last year by Nicolas Arcel. And also like the Suicide Squad situation. Or like Rogue One, it could sit happily in the middle, that the film turned out to be a serviceable one at worst. Could the Han Solo movie turn out really bad? It could. Maybe it will be good, or not. Who knows? We'll just have to wait and see when the final product does come to fruition. The one positive thing to really note from the movie is who's writing the film, namely one of the writers, Lawrence Kasdan, who's not only known for his work on The Empire Strikes Back, he was also responsible for writing Raiders of the Lost Ark. His first tenure was Empire Strikes Back with respect to the Star Wars franchise, where he was called in by George Lucas to rewrite the script written by Lee Brackett. And Kasdan also went on to write Return of the Jedi. He went on to write The Force Awakens, or rather, I should say, he rewrote, along with J.J. Abrams, a script that was previously penned by Michael Arndt of Pixar Toy Story 3 fame. If there's one thing to observe from Lawrence Kasdan's writing of the Star Wars films, he's funny. That's one of the first points. He's quite funny. Watching The Empire Strikes Back, it really has some moments of hilarity here and there. But not just in the humour, but also in character interactions as well. Some of the more serious moments, as demonstrated by Empire, Jedi, and also from The Force Awakens. Even if the movie doesn't turn out as Lucasfilm want it to turn out, I have a feeling the writing might be able to save it. But it also matters in the editing room. If the editing is a mess, then the script is also going to be pretty compromised. But regardless, we'll see how these two movies turn out. Hopefully they'll both at least deliver on what they promise. That's all for this episode. Stay tuned for another episode, Lord willing, in the future. Take care and goodbye.